We are much lower on Drake London than the consensus, but we still agree he's a top 20 fantasy wide receiver. We reveal the next group of our wide receiver fantasy rankings for 2025 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today, we're getting into the next set of our wide receiver rankings. We went through wide receivers 1 through 15 on yesterday's show. If you missed that, you can go listen to it. But we're going to go through about, wide receiver 16 to 30-ish, and then we'll get through even deeper on tomorrow's episode for the wide receiver ranks for this upcoming season. So let's start right off the bat here. And if you're listening yesterday and you're like, where in the world is Drake London? He did not make our top 15, even though, in consensus rankings, he's sitting at wide receiver 9 and in average draft position as well. So we're much lower on him than the rest of the industry, but you have him at wide receiver 16. I have him at wide receiver 18. Listen, last year, yes, he finished as a wide receiver 5 overall, but he was wide receiver 14 and average points per game. And that week 18 game really messed stuff up when he got the 18 targets and, a gazillion yards, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns without Darnell Mooney there. It was just a crazy game. You can't expect him to do that too often. And that wasn't even in the fantasy season. From weeks 1 through 17, he averaged 12.2 points per game. He was a wide receiver 22 all the way in average points per game, all the way up until week 18. So I don't think our rankings are that crazy for him.
No, because, again, we look at the overall scoring, and that's not always the best indicator, right? It just says that a guy was able to stay healthy, which is an important aspect, right? You had him available to you all throughout the season, but then, as Michelle pointed out, if you didn't play into week 18, you weren't benefiting from his best game of the season, and then his numbers looked a little bit more modest. So I think he is definitely inflated. I don't see him having a very high ceiling in this Falcons offense. I just don't. I just may not be totally buying into what they're doing with Michael Penix Jr. and London and Kyle Pitts and whoever they have catching the ball with Darnell Mooney this year. So I just don't feel like I'm going to get a good return on investment if I take Drake London in the top 10. Now, if I take him down here, I probably will. And look, that's where he was last year. I think there could be a little bit bump up if the chemistry with Penix builds from that week 18 game. But we mentioned some of the names that we were taking in the top 10. Like, he didn't feel like he had that same energy in terms of being able to take over games and lead you, even in A.J. Brown, right? Looking at someone that is popular in the 8, 9, 10 range. Like, he just is a player that can take over games. I don't see that kind of value for Drake London. Like, I think he's going to get it based on some targets and some matchups are going to line up well, and he's going to have some big games. But overall, I just don't see him being that type of alpha to just carry your team. And again, if he's going that much ahead of Garrett Wilson, Garrett Wilson, I think, is a better talent. He's in this tough environment there, but the environment just got a little bit better, right? Where he could be the go-to guy. So I'm just not feeling it with London. And we will talk about Wilson here in a moment as well.
Yeah, with London, I don't think either of our rankings are out, are crazy. He finished as a top 18 wide receiver just 4 weeks last season, including that week 18 game. So I feel comfortable with him being lower for us. You mentioned Garrett Wilson. We also didn't talk about him yesterday. He did actually make my top 15. He's my wide receiver 15, but he's your wide receiver 17. So I left him for today's show. And, that's kind of par for the course with where he's going in drafts right now. He has an ADP of wide receiver 15. So I'm right there with that. You're just a couple spots lower. He was a wide receiver 11 overall last year, but we talked about average scoring is really the way you want to look. And he was a wide receiver 23 on average, wide receiver 40 on average in 2023, wide receiver 31 in 2022. But he gets so many targets. We saw Justin Fields really hone in on DJ Moore just 2 years ago when that was his only guy in Chicago. Garrett Wilson's really his only guy with the Jets. So I think Garrett Wilson could have a really good year. And I don't think he has that top 10 potential anymore, especially still with Justin Fields and in this Jets offense. But I do think he could be a top 15 guy.
Yeah, I feel like Wilson has a higher ceiling overall than Drake London. Drake London, there's an arguable statement that he might have the higher floor than Garrett Wilson because of what the Falcons offense can do. But again, the ceiling might be there, that we're discounting that Fields can get him the ball. Like, I think he can, and he's proved he can work with a number one receiver. So again, these guys are so hard to rank, same draft class, but I feel for me, look, it's pretty close between Wilson and London. I'm not necessarily targeting either of these receivers. I'd prefer to go a little bit deeper or get some of the guys earlier. So this could be the range where I personally would avoid some of the picks, and maybe that could be your decision as a drafter. But I think I would avoid getting into this middle teens because there's so much uncertainty at wide receiver here. So if I had my choice, I think I would go London barely over Wilson, but it's close, and I don't know if I'm going to get that much value from either guy beyond the late teens production that I'm going to get.
Yeah, and Garrett Wilson's going a decent amount after Drake London in drafts, so it would mean that Wilson's a better pick to go for than London. Now, so like I said, I had Garrett Wilson at wide receiver 15. I have Devontae Adams at wide receiver 16. We talked about him on yesterday's show. He's your wide receiver 12. And then I have Terry McLaurin at wide receiver 17. And I was shocked to see that I actually ranked him higher than you, because Terry McLaurin's normally your dude. You have him at wide receiver 21. I'm also I'm not like dying to draft him, but he was the wide receiver 7 overall last year, wide receiver 15 in overall or in average points per game. And then, yeah, average points per game on the season doesn't look spectacular, but the first couple weeks started really slow with Jaden Daniels there, right? Like he got, it was looking really scary for Scary Terry to start the year. He got 2.7 points and 5.2 points the first 2 weeks, but then things really started to connect between these two. And from weeks 3 through 18, he was the wide receiver 8 and average scoring. Now, the touchdowns were by far his career high at 13. Maybe that comes down. That's why I have him wide receiver 17. I am a little scared of this contract holdout, him not participating in practice this offseason. Maybe he's rusty, and maybe Deebo Samuel takes some targets away. But he only had 117 targets last year. I don't think that goes down. So I'm comfortable with him at 17. Why do you have him outside your top 20?
Yeah, I'm actually getting worried about this holdout because it's unusual, and here's the reason why. I mean, we want to lump in all these with Trey Hendrickson and Micah Parsons and all that, but this is weird because here's a guy who just recently signed an extension. I think he had a very good year, but as Michelle pointed out, the touchdowns were big. I mean, you look at the yardage just past 1,000, so they were spreading the ball quite a bit around, and those targets, again, were not insane for Terry McLaurin. They didn't treat him as this number one. They did vacate a lot of targets at wide receiver, like I think 117, but you figure Deebo Samuel is going to eat a chunk of that. Maybe Luke McCaffrey steps into a little bit of bigger role there as a complementary player. So I don't know if there's much more that Garrett Wilson can do to produce, and I think the touchdowns would come down. And I'm a little bit worried that he's going to extend. He's going to be in bad shape. He's going to start slowly, and we're not going to see the numbers that we want. And a little bit touchdown dependent. I mean, I think the theory of Terry McLaurin being very productive, it happened, but I didn't expect it to happen with 13 touchdowns, right? That was the last thing I was expecting. I thought he would be a 1,400 receiver yard guy, and that didn't happen. So I'm a little bit worried again that this is going to be more detrimental. And I think the Commanders are like, look, we can spread the ball around. This offense can throw it to a bunch of guys. We don't need to force it to you, and especially with Deebo in there. So it seems like it's very odd because of all the times I would think McLaurin has the least leverage to make this type of move. And I hope he's not back into a corner where his quarterback might get miffed and say, look, Deebo's here. Everyone's here. I want to go in a different direction, and kind of disappointed there. So it's a little bit of a drop. I mean, 17 to 21 is not that much difference, but just be aware of those touchdowns inflating his value, as well as with him in London, that total scoring versus the average scoring.
Yeah, I will say this group of guys, when you get to like wide receiver 15 to like 25, 26, it's really it's hard to figure out where these guys should land. They're all, you kind of could have the same idea for them, same projections where you could see it happening, but they could also be big busts. So that's the concern here with these guys, and that's the hard part about ranking them. But we're going to keep going here, getting deeper into our rankings. And I'll say this is where it starts to get really different for some of these guys for us. So we'll discuss our differences right after a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, high-stakes soccer action, or preseason NFL, which we'll have back with Week 1 this weekend, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting for you. You're already following the action, where it's preseason or regular season. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get on the games while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel a lot to track the matchups, and it really is nice because the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. And whether you're playing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride in the ninth inning or fourth quarter, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5, just $5, and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's great news. Again, open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Good time to get in with preseason football. Again, only on FanDuel. Get in on the action today. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show and look at some more of our 16 through 30 fantasy football rankings at wide receiver. Now, we have a lot of M's to talk about here. We talked about Terry McLaurin. Now we're going to talk about DJ Moore, Marvin Harrison, and DK Metcalf, and Michelle is also an M here. So let's explain this, and you can throw, I guess, a little bit of Tedaron McMillan in there as well. There's a lot of guys in the same group. But now, Michelle, you have DK Metcalf pretty high at 19. So I'll start with that there. Then I'll tell you why I do not have him aside.
Yeah, so I mean, we're not that far off of DK Metcalf, but the guys that you have over DK Metcalf, I have under him. So you're higher on guys like DJ Moore and Devonta Smith and Marvin Harrison Jr. over Metcalf, which I would prefer Metcalf to those guys. And I am considerably lower on Moore and Marvin Harrison Jr. than you are. I have him at 25 and 26. Well, you have DJ Moore at 18 and Marvin Harrison at 20. But the reason I like Metcalf is purely because he's the only good wide receiver with the Steelers, and he's with Aaron Rodgers. Like, if this was going to be Mason Rudolph or, a rookie quarterback, I would be completely out. But Aaron Rodgers is still plenty of good enough quarterback to make a good fantasy wide receiver, right? Like Davante Adams still had a great wide receiver season. Garrett Wilson had his best fantasy season yet with Aaron Rodgers last year. And before Metcalf's injury last season, we could still see he was performing. He was averaging 12.6 points per game, fell off after the injury. But we know he's a touchdown machine, fifth most touchdowns in the league since 2020, behind only A.J. Brown, Devonta Adams, Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, and Jamar Chase. So I think that he's going to catch at least 8 touchdowns with Aaron Rodgers, have a lot of targets. So I like Metcalf this year.
Yeah, he's just very inconsistent to me, and he's frustrating, right? I mean, he should be a lot more efficient with that body and that strength and the speed. He should be producing a way more than like doing about a 50% catch rate with all his production. That's always been the concern with him, and I'm also concerned a little bit. I honestly cannot get a great read on the Steelers' offense in terms of how much they're going to run it versus how much they're going to pass it, right? The weaponry would say, or lack thereof, after what you have at DK Metcalf would say that they want to be run heavy. Caleb Johnson was a priority pick here. Do they want to be run heavy, play off the defense, and be more calculated with their passing game? With Aaron Rodgers maybe throwing deep to DK Metcalf, and that's maybe his role. So I'm not quite sure. I think I just feel a little bit personally safer about DJ Moore and Marvin Harrison being their number ones on their team. And I just think the Bears offense, again, DJ Moore, look, we can't forget about him. We want to buzz Rome Odunze and some other things that are going on there, but I think DJ Moore is going to be a lot more involved with Ben Johnson, and we know what he's done with the number one Detroit and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I'm excited about that possibility. And Marvin Harrison Jr., I just think the talent is there. I think it's going to start to manifest for his QB. So it's pretty close for me. I mean, it's not that much here. I've dropped DK Metcalf to 22, so it's only 3 spots after Michelle. I have DJ Moore up at 18, and I have Harrison at 20. So these guys are all lumped in pretty close. I mean, Terry McLaurin, a sandwich between Harrison and Metcalf, but again, pretty close. But that's a little bit where I'm leaning versus Metcalf in drafts.
Yeah, we have a lot of similarities for, in between these numbers here. I have Devonta Smith at 21. You have him at 19. Cortland Sutton, I have at 22. You have him at 23. Tedaron McMillan, 23 to your 24. So very similar. Even Jameson Williams, 24 to your 25. Very similar rankings. But my wide receiver 20, Jerry Jeudy, this might be our biggest difference among all of our rankings at any position. I have him at wide receiver 20. You have him all the way down at wide receiver 35. So you are very skeptical about what he can do this year. He was a wide receiver 15 in total points last year. An average, yes, he was only the wide receiver 29 in average on the season. But from weeks 11 through 18, the whole second half of the year, he was averaging 101 receiving yards per game and 16.2 points per game in half PPR. That ranked 8th among wide receivers in average scoring during that span. Elijah Moore is gone, and that might seem silly, but he had the second most targets in this Browns offense at 102 targets. Amari Cooper was gone in the middle of last year, but he had 53 targets last year. Jordan Atkins is gone, and he was the 4th most targeted guy in this Browns offense. I think Jerry Jeudy is going to be peppered with targets no matter who the quarterback is. And he played with a lot of bad quarterbacks last year. Like, yeah, a lot of the big games did come with Jameis Winston, which we love for fantasy. But I do expect him to just continually see upwards of 10 plus targets a game, because who else is there to throw to? And I think any of these quarterbacks that come in is going to just really rely on one guy, especially the younger ones. And then if it's Joe Flacco, great. Joe Flacco is a lot like Jameis Winston, where they help out fantasy wide receivers.
Yeah, and the difference is, I mean, Jameis Winston played a lot with Jerry Jeudy. Joe Flacco's guy a lot was David Njoku the previous season when he was in there. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, I'm just not high and attaching myself too much to the Browns offense in general. It doesn't matter. The running game is now not what it was, right, to set things up. So that's in transition. The offensive line's got questions. I don't know who's going to end up starting at first, starting at the end. It's pretty messy, and I'm not feeling like Jerry Jeudy has close to talent of Malik Neighbors in that Giants quarterback situation to fight through it and produce. Like, he's okay. I mean, I just am not excited. Like, I want him I kind of put him down there to say, look, he's a usable wide receiver 3. Like, he's there. He's not going to excite you. Maybe I'm a little bit undervaluing just the way the targets are going to fall there, but I'm just not interested in drafting him. That's maybe what I'm doing to remind myself that I have him way down. Okay, I can see him as a wide receiver 3, but I'm not going to bang the table to go after him.
Now, it's always hard to rank rookies. And finally, our first rookie wide receiver comes into our rankings at Tedaron McMillan, at wide receiver 23 for me, at wide receiver 24 for you. Now, we had 3 guys, finished top 12, 3 rookie wide receivers last year, and Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., and Malik Neighbors. So, I mean, McMillan has the draft capital. He has a great situation he's going into in terms of like opportunity for targets. We'll see if Bryce Young can continue to grow and that Dave Canales offense with the Panthers. But I mean, I feel very comfortable with him at this spot. And I think just with his ability and his size, he can be a true X wide receiver in this league. And I'm excited to see what he could do. I think he's the type of guy where you're taking to be that type of league winner guy, where he could completely fail as a rookie, but he has such high upside.
Yeah, I don't see him failing, and I think there's a little bit of better just feeling about him than the top receiver from last year, Marvin Harrison Jr., producing right away as a rookie. I just feel like that offense, that quarterback, a lot of things are ascending with the Panthers, and I want a piece of that offense. And that's why I wanted to make sure where I have him ranked to say, hey, we want to look at him as a wide receiver too. He's a clear number 1 on his team. You're going to figure out the other targets here. They got Adam Thielen, but it drops off after that with a bunch of guys, including like a David Moore or even Hunter Renfro's back on the roster. So there's just a lot of question marks in that receiving core, and I think they're going to pepper McMillan plenty of targets and treat him like the Evans would be in the offense that we're used to with Canales and Tampa. So I think that transition is going to happen. I think they drafted him a lot for the similarities of Mike Evans.
Now we have Travis Hunter, the other rookie wide receiver who went top 10, well, number 2 overall in the draft this year. And he's coming up in our rankings here. We have him exactly at the same spot at wide receiver 28. We will discuss him and the rest of our top 30 wide receiver rankings right after a quick break. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, Vinnie and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, as always, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. Our leagues have been running through Yahoo for a while now. It's a super easy setup to get your league going. You get a great mobile app that's very user-friendly. And I just love how their message boards and how easy they make it to have those fun conversations with your league mates all season long. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all began on August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy football league at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. All right, let's get into Travis Hunter, the other rookie wide receiver who's getting a ton of buzz. And I think maybe we do have him ranked too low. He might keep moving up my rankings. And that's Travis Hunter for the Jaguars. We both have him ranked at wide receiver 28, which his average draft position right now is wide receiver 30. So we're close to that, a little bit higher. I think the situation he's walking into is very ideal for him. I'm not worried about the snaps he's going to see on defense because he played so many snaps at Colorado. It's going to be less than that no matter what. And you can get away with playing 60 to 70% of snaps on offense and still be a very good fantasy wide receiver. There's so many vacated targets in this Jaguars offense with Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, and Evan Ingram all gone this offseason. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. only helps him, right? Like defenses have to be worried about him. Hunter should, I think, thrive in this offense.
Yeah, that's the thing we have to remember. In the situation with Liam Cohen in Tampa, there were definitely 2 receivers that could produce consistently in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. We talked about Chris Godwin on average being the wide receiver 4, so essentially you had 2 top 10 receivers there in that offense. And again, the vacated targets are key because a lot of them are going to go to what we see with not only Travis Hunter, but Brenton Strange. They're going to have the opportunities here. Strange sees a lot of tight end targets vacated by Evan Ingram. So that helps. And then the receiver. So they're going to get into that chunk there and really be effective. And again, some people want to see Hunter in the slot. I think he's an outside number 2 that can occasionally see the slot. But regardless, he's going to get very favorable coverage inside or out. So I really feel like Travis Hunter, again, I want to bump him higher. If I had more clarity that he was going to see even greater majority of snaps, I might do that, but I'm just being actually a little conservative with him at 28, and he could end up well into the wide receiver 2s.
Now, another big difference between us in these rankings, I have Ricky Pearsall at wide receiver 27. So one spot ahead of Travis Hunter. I might end up switching those up by the time the more I hear about Travis Hunter dominating in training camp, the more excited I get about him. But you have Pearsall all the way down at wide receiver 43, which isn't even technically all the way down because his ADP is wide receiver 45. So apparently I'm just super, super high on him. Maybe you can call me a homer. I am a 49ers fan. I'll put that out there. I just don't know how he isn't the team's wide receiver 1. I know people want Juwan Jennings to be a thing. He had a couple big games last year. He had that one monster game. The team cannot go into the season expecting any difference in a 6-11 record again if Juwan Jennings has to be the wide receiver 1. He's a good role player. Ricky Pearsall, they drafted in the first round to be the guy that takes over for either Deebo Samuel or they were trying to get rid of Ayuk this offseason. It didn't work. But Ayuk's not going to be there for probably half the year. He needs to step up. There's 124 vacated targets from last year, 94 of those from the wide receiver position. We got to see a very limited sample size from Pieraw last year after getting shot in the chest right before the season started. But in the 3 games that he saw at least 6 targets, he did what he needed to do. He had great performances, averaged 18.6 points per game in half PPR, and scored over 15 fantasy points in all of those games. So when he got the targets, he excelled. I fully expect him to get the targets this year. He and Brock Purdy have been working all offseason long together. So I'm excited to see what he could do.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an unknown quantity, and you could be very well right. We could be somewhere in the middle of where we have him, and he's a solid wide receiver 3. You kind of have him there, wide receiver 27, but he could end up in the 30s and also give you that good return on investment. Either way, I mean, I haven't bumped up a little bit ahead of consensus. Like, I want to believe in him a little bit more. I need clarity on the Juwan Jennings injury and see if he's fully trusted. You also have George Kittle, so these two should be the main guys, at least until Ayuk comes around. So then you got to figure out how much do they want to work in Pieraw behind him, how healthy is he, how can he put everything together, right? So there's a little bit of unknown quantity there, and I think he's a little bit like the J.J. McCarthy of wide receivers. Like, I like all the concepts, I like the system, I like the talent. Is it all going to come together? It just comes down to the player. So you very well might be right there, but again, I would not be surprised at all for my wide receiver 43 ranking if he emerges as a wide receiver 3 that we can count on more weeks than not.
Now, Xavier, Worthy, and George Pickens just creeping into our top 30 here. You have Worthy at 26 and Pickens at 29. Pickens I have at 30, and then Worthy I have at wide receiver 29. So we both prefer Worthy over Pickens. I think it's more like we have more trust that he could possibly be the wide receiver 1 in the Chiefs offense. Pickens is so hard to figure out because you could see the talent on the field. He didn't get as many consistent opportunities with the Steelers as we would have liked, but now he has to split with CeeDee Lamb. So do you think we're too low on Pickens? And do you feel that much more confidently to draft Xavier Worthy over him?
I think there's going to be a little bit of a trust timing issue that we need to get down with Dak Prescott. If you're George Pickens, I mean, he's got 2 very familiar guys, CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson. So we'll see how they incorporate that. Is he going to be treated as a glorified version of Michael Gallup, where he's just the deep threat and they use him to stretch the field? Or is he going to get the consistent targets and be treated like the number 2 in this offense and just get them even ahead of Ferguson with that? So that's really what I'm concerned about with Pickens. He's one of those guys. I mean, a little bit like Metcalf, the guy he was kind of traded for, where you have the upside in catching the ball, but he has to make sure he catches the ball and get his head on right to be efficient with his target. So I feel like Xavier Worthy's got that a little bit more with the Super Bowl he had. I mean, we showed the kind of chemistry he had with Patrick Mahomes, so he can build on that, especially if Rashee Rice can deflect some coverage there in Kansas City.
Now, we still are going to go through more of our wide receiver rankings on tomorrow's show, but that will be it for today. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.